Sit closer to the fire. No, closer than that. The cold out there, it doesn't just freeze the skin. It waits for you to forget what heat feels like. But there is another kind of cold, a white, blinding cold that burns at 60 degrees Celsius, a place where the earth dropped 100 meters below the sea, and the sky forgot how to cry. 3 men were found sitting upright in the salt. No wounds, no struggle, just crystallized. You think we know silence. You don't. True silence is heavy. It presses against your eardrums until you can hear the blood pumping in your own neck. In the white expanses, the animals don't sing. The jackals won't cross the border. The vultures don't circle. They know. The air smells wrong down there, thick with a bitter alkaline dust that rots the nostrils, backed by the heavy, foul stench of native sulfur venting from the deep fissures.
The ground under your boots is a brittle, snow-white crust, stretching out until the horizon warps into jagged, impossible architectures. And then you hear it, tink, tink, like a fingernail tapping on a frozen window. But there are no windows here, only salt. The skin on your lips begins to crack. The moisture leaves your eyes, leaving them raw and bloodshot. You look back at your guide. He isn't looking at the horizon. He is looking at his feet, counting the seconds between the snaps in the crust. He knows that out here, the earth isn't dead. It's just waiting for something to step wrong.
The old caravan masters of the lowlands don't speak its name aloud. They call it the Salt Flat Stalker, the Gambo. They tell you it isn't a beast of blood and bone. It is an elemental malice, a punitive force born from an unforgiving earth. It is the desert itself, waking up when the noon sun hits the basin. They say it watches the lines. If a traveler lets greed settle in his chest, or if his knees begin to buckle from the glare, the heat begins to dance. It doesn't hunt with claws. It projects an illusion. A cool, shimmering spring of fresh water just beyond the next ridge. You see the faces of your kin, calling your name from the mirage. You step off the compacted trail. One step. That is all it takes. Your throat feels like sandpaper now. The bitter, alkaline dust coats the back of your tongue, heavy and dry. The mirage shimmers, turning the distant black volcanic basalt into floating towers. You want to believe the water is real. Your mind demands it. But the guide holds your shoulder, his grip tight, his eyes fixed on the white floor. The 19th century logs tell a grimmer tale. The caravan masters who survived the long hauls recorded something more material. They wrote of a hollowed skin, an entity that mimics the exact hexagonal geometric cracking of the dried earth. It lies perfectly flat, motionless, invisible. You think you are stepping on sun-baked clay, but you are stepping onto a leathery, mineral-encrusted torso. The air carries the sharp, metallic tang of old brine, drying on leather. When the foot makes contact, the skin contracts. It wraps around the limbs like a wet shroud, and the dehydration begins instantly, pulling the life from your body into the halite crust.
Your boots are heavy, white with a fine powder that eats through the stitching. You can feel the heat radiating upward through the soles, a steady, rhythmic throb that matches your pulse. The landscape offers no shadow, no place to hide your eyes from the overexposed glare. In 1889, the Sultanate of Ausa signed away the territories of Gambo to the Westerners. The mapmakers thought it was just a name for a treacherous zone of thin crust and boiling mud. They didn't understand that the territory was the thing. The old Sultan's emissaries only crossed those flats holding a silver baton, a magical anchor. Its presence stabilized the shifting mirages, neutralized the illusions, and kept the hollowed skin from tightening beneath the pack animals. Without it, you are just raw material waiting to be preserved.
Turn the pages of the dead. Winter, 1893. An explorer named Lester Raymond took his party north of the active lava lakes of Urta Ale, trying to map the fissures. On a hypersaline pan, 20 kilometers into the nothing, his guide stopped dead. They found 3 salt miners. They weren't face down in the dirt. They weren't twisted in the agony of heat stroke. They were sitting upright, relaxed, positioned directly on the open salt crust, as if having a midday conversation. Their skin had been reduced to a translucent, brittle parchment, preserved so fast it mirrored the ancient natron mummification of the Nile. But it was the faces that broke the expedition's nerve. The soft tissues of their eyes, their tongues, they were completely gone. In their place, growing deep within the ocular orbits and oral cavities, were large, perfectly formed, transparent crystals of pure halite. Natural salt, grown with flawless cubic symmetry. The rotten egg stench of native sulfur hangs low over the bodies, refusing to lift in the stagnant air. The sun sits directly overhead, casting no shadows from their seated frames. You reach out to touch the parchment of a sleeve. It snaps like a dry twig. There were no predator tracks. No desert hyenas had touched them. No jackals had torn the dry skin. There were no human footprints in the surrounding crust, except for the boots of Raymond's own men. The miners had been claimed by the hollowed skin, left sitting as monuments. Inside their open chest cavities, the salt didn't grow wild. It formed in perfect cubic structures, layered, stepped, deliberate hopper crystals. And they were carved with geometric precision. As the sun moves across that white sky, the light enters those horizontal chest crystals at a fixed refractive index. The light bends through the internal stepped terraces of the hopper structure, projecting a sharp, moving geometric shadow onto the mummified skin, crawling inch by inch across the dead man's ribs. It isn't a natural formation. It's an optical sundial. a countdown timer. Every step the shadow takes across the ribs marks 1 hour less of survival for the search party looking for him. A precise, mathematical expression of punishment. The air is completely still now, but the metallic tink-tink continues, a cold metronome in the heat. The shadows on the ribs move with absolute certainty. They don't jump. They glide, marking the transition from noon to the long, suffocating dusk. Today, they build asphalt roads through the salt pans. They have motorized trucks, commercial mining, and adventure tourists taking photographs of the lava lakes. They took the name Gambo and buried it in paperwork, printed it on seed catalogs for drought-tolerant wheat, called it progress. They think they've tamed it. They think a name can be turned into bread. But the old caravan drivers still live in the dry season, when the heat climbs to 50 degrees and the horizon begins to float. They look down at the hexagonal cracks. They hear it. Dink, dink. The expanding lattice.
The desert doesn't forget its true name, and it's still counting down.